Okay, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on exploring innovative approaches for water and biodiversity following COP15. So I'm Mark Smith, I'm the Business Development Director for Water in RSK, and I'm just going to give a few, we have a really exciting panel today actually to talk about, so I'm hoping to get a really good discussion going. So basically the United Nations Biodiversity Conference, COP15, I know a lot of people seem to know about COP27, 28, but there's the biodiversity one, COP15, that ended in Montreal, Canada last December. And there was a landmark agreement to guide global action on nature through to 2030. The event was chaired by China and was hosted by Canada, and it was attended by 188 different governments. So it actually resulted in the adoption of a global biodiversity framework. And this agreement aims to address biodiversity loss, restore ecosystems, and protect indigenous rights. It covers, if you're familiar with the UN Sustainability Development Goals, it's really across four, as I see it. There's SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, SDG 13, Climate Action, SDG 15, Life on Land, and of course SDG 6, Clean Water and Sanitation. So personally, I'm just back from World Water Week in Stockholm, which was a really good event. And the theme of it this year was Seeds of Change, Innovative Solutions for a Water-Wise World. And I must say, my general overall feeling is one, there's a lot of frustration in the right across the sectors about action. So in terms of solutions they were talking about, it wasn't actually technical solutions or technology solutions. They were talking about the innovative solutions were all about people. So it was about mobilizing youth, mobilizing indigenous people, and respecting their sort of inputs into it rather than big corporations coming on and doing projects, which is really interesting. And that fits perfectly into our seminar today, which is again talking about going from commitments to actions. And as I said, I think we have a really good panel today. First up is Dr. Phoebe Carter, who's a principal environmental consultant at the RSK company Nature Positive. Phoebe is a chartered environmentalist with over 20 years working in nature conservation. Her PhD is in aquatic veterinary studies, investigating the impacts of pollution on aquatic life, and has really continued something that's been a lifelong fascination with freshwater and marine habitats, and has seen her work in the UK and overseas. So basically what Phoebe's going to discuss, I think she's going to set the scene for us really and explain what is biodiversity, discuss freshwater and marine ecosystems and the risks they face, and hopefully finish up with an action plan on how to restore and preserve those beautiful ecosystems for future generations. So over to you, Phoebe.
Thank you, Mark. Just need to take control of the screen. There we go. Thank you very much. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm just going to give a sort of a high-level overview of biodiversity and our aquatic environments and sort of the risks that they're facing. So the main, what is biodiversity? It's something a term we all use, but often we don't really know what it is. So biodiversity is all the different forms of life on Earth and the habitats that they live in. It also includes the genetic diversity within species and the way that species interact with one another and their environment. And that together forms ecosystems. Sorry, there's a delay on moving my slide. Hang on. It's not moving forward, Katie. There we go. So the world's biodiversity intactness is now dramatically lower than the safe limit needed for the ecological processes that we depend upon. The Biodiversity Intactness Index is an international index which is used to compare countries on how nature has fared under pressures from humanity in terms of land use changes. And the UK is currently the lowest 12% of global countries for biodiversity intactness. So the biodiversity and climate crises are intertwined. Loss of biodiversity affects climate change and climate change impacts biodiversity. If we think about the wildfires that are going on at the minute, The high temperatures caused by climate change have made our forests drier and more vulnerable to wildfires, and then in turn these wildfires are releasing more carbon into the atmosphere. Well-functioning biodiverse ecosystems provide services that influence the availability of water and its quality, and these services are crucial to issues such as water storage and flow regulation, filtering, and flood and drought protection. Excuse the delay on moving on. Water and wetlands are a vital part of the natural world that both people and wildlife depend on for survival. Fresh water accounts for 3% of global water, covering just 1% of the Earth's surface. These healthy freshwater ecosystems provide biodiversity-rich systems. They support at least 10% of Earth's species. They also provide us with drinking water and the water that we need for agricultural management and also urban water management. But these freshwater ecosystems face many risks, including climate change, physical modification, pollution, development, abstraction of water for agricultural needs and to meet new housing demands, and also the spread of invasive and non-native species. It's now thought that a third of all freshwater species are at risk of extinction, and a quarter of the critically endangered species in the world actually live in freshwater systems. So oceans cover around 70% of the Earth's surface, and a healthy ocean ecosystem helps us absorb heat. Up to 90% of the excess heat trapped in the Earth's system due to climate change has been absorbed by the oceans. They also absorb carbon for us, so 10 gigatons of carbon is annually sequestered into the deep ocean. They produce oxygen, between 50 and 90% of oxygen, and they also act as a buffer, protecting our atmosphere from seeing the full effects of climate change. If you think about without the ocean currents, regional temperatures would be far more extreme, and we'd have much less of Earth's land being habitable. Really crucially, they provide food and livelihoods for a significant number of people. Tropical reefs, coral reefs alone provide food and income for about 1 billion people. Sorry, there you go. But as with freshwater ecosystems, our ocean systems are suffering from significant risks. So we've got climate change risks. It's resulting in acidification, creating these large patches of ocean dead zones where there's no oxygen. And we've got increasing sea temperatures too, and both of these are causing disruption to marine food chains. We've got significant issues with plastic pollution, these sort of miles and miles of plastic islands floating out in the Pacific, and issues with nutrient runoff, sewage, and litter. Overfishing is causing a loss of sort of marine biodiversity and damage to the seabed, and shipping is a significant risk to oceans from spills and discharges of chemicals and oils, and transfer of invasive species between places, and also damage to natural habitats such as mangroves and seagrass beds that are near ports. Global nitrogen oxide and sulfur oxide emissions from shipping represent about 15% and 13% of the total from anthropogenic sources as well. Invasive species are a real problem as well, and they can lead to the extinction of native plants and animals, destroy biodiversity, and permanently alter habitats through direct and indirect effects. This can result in huge economic impacts and fundamentally disrupts aquatic ecosystems. And invasive species are now considered to be one of the greatest threats to marine and coastal biodiversity worldwide, second only to habitat loss. So what can we do about it? Well, there needs to be a whole of government and whole of society approach to meeting the 4 goals and 23 targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So with relation to these aquatic ecosystems, we need to restore and conserve inland waterways and coastal and marine environments, halt human-induced extinctions, and ensure that the use, trade, harvesting, and management of wild species is sustainable. We need to eliminate, reduce, and mitigate the impacts of invasive alien species on biodiversity and ecosystem services. We need to reduce pollution risks and the negative impact of pollution from all sources. We need to minimize the impact of climate change and ocean acidification on biodiversity and increase its resilience through mitigation, adaptation, and disaster risk reduction, using things like nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based approaches. And we need to increase the quality, connectivity, and access to sort of green and blue spaces in urban and densely populated areas. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Phoebe. I'm not sure if I'm depressed, if I should be depressed about all that, or hopeful. But But I think there's a lot of work to be done, and we're continuing to do quite a lot of damage. I mean, your talk mentioned that we need to increase the quality and quantity of green and blue spaces in densely populated areas. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe you could say a few words about how can we build better in terms of water and biodiversity?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously, as time goes on, more and more people are going to sort of move into sort of these urban landscapes. And we really do need to be building better. We need to be reducing sort of our areas of hard standing, move away from this sort of tarmacking everything. We need to be putting in high quality green infrastructure as standard, not sort of as a luxury. It needs to be something that we're sort of thinking about, even as sort of volume building. Use things like SUDs, so sustainable urban drainage schemes, but make sure that they're fit for purpose and they remain fit for purpose, and also that they serve a dual purpose as well, for not just for sort of water capture and purification, but also for wildlife too. Often you'll see SUD systems and they've been completely sort of annihilated of any vegetation, whereas actually they can serve a dual purpose if they're managed correctly. You just need well considered design. And there's lots of people out there beginning to think about it, but it just needs to become more mainstream and something that we all adopt, I think.
Okay, I think the high quality green infrastructure, the SUDs, is something that is really, really prevalent in the water sector at the moment. But there is a whole thing about doing things to communities rather than doing things with communities, which I think reflects some of the other themes. You also mentioned invasive species, Phoebe, as the greatest threat to marine and coastal biodiversity worldwide, second only to habitat loss, I think. I mean, this is something that came up repeatedly in Stockholm the last few days. Why are invasive species such an issue? And again, you know, not so much how do we fix it, but you know, what's the best plan of action that you can see to sort of deal with these?
Yeah, so invasive species, it's just, I think as we travel more and as we've got all of things like shipping, and you are getting things like species being transferred in ballast water or attached to ships, it is becoming more significant. So if you take the example of the zebra mussel, they've been moved around in the ballast of ships. So they're now pretty much all around the world, and they're having a major impact. So financially, they're having a massive impact because they reproduce in such vast numbers, producing about 40,000 to 1 million eggs per year from one individual. They can form giant clusters that end up blocking up power stations, and that's costing millions of pounds per year to remove those from outlets at power stations. And they're also significantly damaging our ecosystem. So using zebra mussels as an example, they filter out algae and the food that a lot of our native species rely on, which means that we're sort of impacting on the availability of food for invertebrates and young fish. So then we've got this whole knock-on effect further up the food chain. So we're seeing less availability of all food for a whole range of species, and people too, as well. And also because they create this sort of transparent water by filtering out so much, because they filter about 1 litre per day per individual, you're getting this transparent water, which is encouraging sort of these algal blooms. So again, you've then got health risks. So what do we do about it? I'm not sure. Those are almost impossible to control, I think. But on a personal level, we must, we just all need to take care around water and biosecurity, really. But on a global level, invasive species are going to cost millions, billions of pounds to keep under control.
Okay, thank you very much, Phoebe. I was reading yesterday, actually, I recommend anybody who's access to, there's a really interesting article on the some of the real problems they're having in Lough Neagh in Ireland at the moment, actually, and they mentioned zebra mussels in there as well as being one of the issues around that. Okay, I've got before we move on to the next one, I've got a red flag from the organisers to say I forgot to go through the housekeeping, but I think the main point to raise, so apologies for that, but the main point to raise is basically we welcome questions during the presentation, and there is a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So if you have any, please just put them into the chat and we'll pull them together and we'll get the panel together at the end of the session and we'll go through them. Okay, so next up we have Paul Horton, and Paul is somebody I've known for many, many years. We've worked together. He's the Chief Executive of Future Water, the Future Water Association. RSK are a member of Future Water Association. I recommend that you get on their website because there's some really, really interesting stuff that they do, and we're entitled to access all of that content. Future Water is an organisation that promotes innovation and forward thinking in our sector, and it's something that Paul's been doing for over 30 years, working with NGOs, not-for-profits, charities and trade organisations, I suppose across the water and environment sectors. He has undertaken an array of work that has involved TV, radio, he's on it all, and of course policy as well. So it's the written word, it's the spoken word. And in addition also to CEO, I think it's part of Paul's life really, is you're also non-exec with REAF, which is a sustainable fisheries organisation established as a community interest company focused in Norfolk and Suffolk. So a man who really is embedded in the whole sector, understands it, understands where it's coming from and hopefully where it's going to. And I hope, Paul, you'll be able to build on Phoebe's comments and focus on the state of innovation in the water sector. I did hear recently that we shouldn't say water sector, we should, because water is life. It's not just a sector. But also I think how you can link that innovation into achieving some of the COP15 targets, particularly with respect to nature-based solutions. Okay, Paul, over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. And following Phoebe's presentation, it made me think of necessity as a mother of invention. And when we're in the state we're in, there's certainly a driving force and a need to do things better, to do things differently. And related to what Phoebe said as well, all the headlines that sea temperatures smashed all the seasonal records this year. So what does this mean? Well, for me personally, it means that we've got to be not just smarter and cleverer, but we've got to actually drive change through the industry, and drive change in a way that is looking at how we do things despite what the politicians and other people do. And for me, that sits very much in the sphere of innovation. And I'm just going to touch on why. When you look at innovation, you start to say, well, where is it coming from? What are the indicators? Obviously research papers, articles, etc. But look at the figure, 56 million patented ideas that sit within our sector. And that's not looking at absolutely everything. And then you look at the ecosystem that brings together organizations, people, researchers, industry, etc. And the reason that's important, and yes, there's the spanner representing problem solved, is that this is an ecosystem of people, of ideas, as much as the natural environment. And obviously it's all interconnected. And when you start to have such an ecosystem, you start to look at things to say, okay, well, what is happening? How do we get this visibility that says what's going on in the world of innovation? And then how do we bring it to the issues that we're trying to manage and solve? So as you can see, you get signals from the number of papers that are published, from specific focus areas like in Saudi Arabian desalination, but you look at the startups. 470 million has been raised by startups in 90 countries just across the last few years. 1,500 water conservation startups founded in the past 3 years. All of this is vital and important, and the visibility of all of that is critical. And NASDAQ has, amongst others, have brought out a water scarcity price index, which I find fascinating, because I think we need to get our heads around water scarcity in a better way. And when you start to build that picture up, you start to produce what I call a thematic view, a sort of landscape view of water management. And if I look particularly at remote water management, which I think is critical to the nature-based solutions approach, you can start to build up this picture that looks like a sea, so it's got real relevance, but then starts to highlight where some of those innovations are coming together, and where you have some of the more dynamic things happening. And that could be around network systems, it could be around monitoring, it could be around things that Phoebe mentioned when you look at sustainable urban drainage systems in the urban environment. So building that picture, I think, is critical. And then you can start to say, well, if we've got that picture, what does it mean? Well, actually, some of the inventions are coming from things happening in residential and commercial buildings. Some of them are coming from the way we're now using computing systems and quantum computing systems. Some of them from fire controls, etc., and robotics there as well. So you have a growing, interesting value chain that could feed into the ideas that we're all trying to solve in this space. And the reality of that around the COP15 targets, urban greening, Phoebe's mentioned that, there is sustainable urban drainage, but equally there's some brilliant work going on about turning the urban environment into water capture systems. So not just sponge cities, but there's cleverer things even than that going on. Drones and satellite technologies, for example, in terms of reforestation and the approach to reforestation. And there you can include the mangrove areas that have been sadly taken away over the years. You start to look at then eco-friendly infrastructure and how that ties into nature-based solutions. And obviously the things we know about, such as wetlands and what that means for water purification, and how it challenges more traditional systems, and then all the digital tools that are growing, which allow you to develop, monitor, provide real-time data on nature-based solutions. The cleverer things about payments for ecosystem services, it's not enough, in my view, just to set up a fund and use that fund to drive projects. You can be smarter and clever about the way you incentivize financing and how that's then used in projects around preservation and natural ecosystem support and development. I've included biotechnology here because we start to get into that space that says, do we look at how we use genetically modified things, be they plants and other things, in terms of environmental remediation, in terms of restoration? There's always a bit of controversy in this space, but I think it's an important area to at least look at what's happening around innovation. And you broadly can measure innovation by looking at IP, which includes everything from patents to trademarks to other things that are published through journals, etc. And then build up a picture or a landscape of what's happening, then decide whether that's enough. So I think innovation is critical to what we do under COP15. Thanks, Mark.
Hey, thank you very much, Paul. Lots and lots to think about there, actually. One of the things that was really quite prevalent, again, referring back to this week, was how a kilo of carbon is a kilo of carbon, be it in England or be it anywhere else in the world. So it's very tradable. But a cubic meter of water is very contextual. It depends on whether it's a cubic meter of water in a glacier or is it a cubic meter of water in a basin that's polluted. And it's not as easy. It's more complex. I think the idea of using that sort of innovation in not just the technology but also the trading is really, really interesting. So I think just a couple of quick questions, Paul, is how can innovation across the supply chain, because I know you represent over 130 or 40 members in supply chain, how can innovation across the supply chain support the objectives of COP15? How is that sort of brought together and then sort of deployed?
Well, if you think of some of the things I tried to reflect in the last slide, Mark, I think this is where we have what's the clever thinking around sustainable urban drainage systems, and if we broaden that thinking, where can we apply that? Well, we can basically apply it anywhere in the world. How do we then use the data and information we've got to help monitor things, the amount of deforestation, so that we can target reforestation? And I think again that's innovation. So you get real-time data, you get a very clear, very fast understanding. And then when you get into the biotech world and others, you're into, well, how clever can we be? If we're going to restore, if we're going to help these natural ecosystems survive and develop and grow for the future, then how clever can we be in this space? And I think this is all where innovation comes into play, and innovation driving other innovation. And we start to look at these as a complete ecosystem, and not necessarily in bits and pieces, but then how does it all fit together as a system? So that then pulls in suppliers from everywhere. That pulls in people who are thinking about different things in different parts of the world, all suddenly come into that same system, as it were, and start to go, well, you've done this, well, I'll do that, I've got this idea. And before you know it, you're pushing things. You've got a ball rolling down a hill, getting bigger and bigger. And I'm a firm believer in that. And we spend too much time talking and not enough time doing.
Okay, all right. Okay, Paul, we leave it there. I know Steve's going to build on some of those themes, particularly around moving on from piloting towards business as usual. So I think we leave it at that for the moment. We're getting lots of questions in, so I want to keep it moving along. So thanks very much, Paul. So next, we're going to move a little bit, change the pace a little bit, and move into construction. And Steve Kennedy is here, and he will talk really about redefining construction enabled by digital and innovation. And it's something that Steve has been doing for many years. So Steve is the MWH Treatment's head of digital and innovation, and focusing collaboration, innovation, and the integration of resilient solutions into a systems-based approach. So his passionate focus is embracing the digital revolution and changing the water industry's approach to delivering sustainable outcomes in a customer-focused world. So I think as a contractor, really, Steve, it'd be really interesting to see. You know, we've heard from the ecologist, we've heard from the innovator, and now you're the man who actually put this into practice. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mark. What I just want to talk about, so I think really the key that I'm going to go through today is not so much the what we deliver, it's how we deliver it, and taking those technologies, taking the techniques to clean and purify water, either for drinking or for discharge into the environment, and really talking about how we can deliver them differently. And I want to talk about our initiative, what we call Redefining Construction. So a little bit of background about MWH Treatment, first of all. MWH Treatment is an integrated design build sustainable solution provider. We work solely in the UK for the water sector. We're the leading integrated design build contractor. So that means that we've got our own internal engineering team that work with our delivery team to deliver the solutions. We've got about 1,200 staff, including 350 engineers. Our turnover is about 300 to 350 million pounds a year, and we deliver our solutions for water and wastewater for 7 of the UK water companies, from Scottish Water in Northern Ireland in the north, United Utilities, Severn Trent, Anglian, Thames and Southern. So we've got a very broad footprint in the UK water sector. As a company, we've been around since 1820, the earliest organisations in our group. So as a company, we've got an innovative culture. We adapt and flex to the trends as they're passing through, and redefining construction is very much what we see about the future and delivering the huge programs of investment that are required over the next few years to achieve the standards that are required. So what is redefining construction? For us, it's about shifting the way that we deliver our projects from traditional on-site construction to off-site assembly. So we're looking to move those assets and move people away from construction sites into clean factories around the country, assembling and fabricating assets in multiple places at the same location. And the key requirements for that are relying on above ground technologies. Moving things above grounds means you don't need big excavations, you don't need all of the works that go with it. Using off-site, and on the top right hand corner there you can see a pipework gallery that was built in a factory, about 45-50 meters long, 7 meters tall and 3 meters wide. So a huge structure that was assembled in the factory, disassembled, moved to site. We're looking at low carbon technologies, and again, off-site construction really helps with that because it forces you to move away from concrete as the container for the vessels that you're installing equipment in. And we're reusing our technology, so templating our solutions as far as possible, solving a problem once and then using that solution multiple times. To achieve this means a different way. If you're assembling stuff in factories and then bringing it together, you have to re-engage, or you have to engage with the end users differently. You've got to get their acceptance of what's proposed and how they're going to operate to maintain it ahead of that fabrication happening in the factories. And enabling that is very much through digital tools. And we've got our own digital toolbox that covers the whole life cycle of projects. We use visualization to unlock power of collaborative innovation. Visualization is really important, converting Word documents into images that people understand much more quickly. And when people understand, they ask more informed and intelligent questions about how things could be better, how to mitigate risks or realize opportunities, rather than using brain power to understand what's being said to them. We've got to make it accessible. So again, our tools in our teams in the field, accessing information, And then it's got to be embedded, and we undertake assessments of all of our projects, every single project, looking at the tools that they're using, where they're being used, and where they aren't, what the issues and blockers are. Our approach, very much, we've got a core set of tools, which is we survey it, so we collect the information, we model it, collect the information, and then we make it accessible from our offices, so people don't have to go out to site to see what those site conditions are, what the existing condition is, how to access and maintain it. We model it so that people can see what it's going to look like. We rehearse, so digital rehearsal allows you to practice that construction sequencing ahead of getting to the site. It's a bit like a play. You wouldn't turn up on the night of a play and expect everything to go well. You would rehearse it in advance, so you've got the best chance of a success. We assemble, so we're moving away from that construction, bringing pieces together on site piece by piece. We're actually just integrating packages together. And then a big part for the future, building this digital asset as well as the physical asset. So transferring not only the physical asset at the end of a job, but also a digital asset, helping build these digital twins that are going to unlock efficiencies in the future. What we also see is that's the approach. It's enabled by digital. We still look at innovation, and following on from Paul's speech, a big part of innovation for us is, I think there is quite a lot of innovation in the water sector. The challenge is we get a good idea, we trial it and we say, isn't that fantastic? And then we look at another innovation. We don't re-baseline the way that we deliver it. So for us, successful innovation is the multiple application of good ideas. And we look at innovation in around the tools, so very much the digital tools enabling the collaboration and communication between people. We look at techniques, ways of working. How can you encourage people to work effectively together, to break down barriers, to mitigate risks and realize opportunities? We look at the technologies, and you got a picture in the bottom corner there around wetlands. But at the same time, there's got to be a balance. There's got to be a balance between being innovative and being constantly improving in the efficiencies of delivery. So the templating is really important. Get something, re-baseline it. Once you've re-baselined the way that you deliver, then look for innovations to improve it, rather than comparing all innovations against the old baseline. So what are our next steps? Really, there's big pieces of works around data and analytics, huge topics, using AI and machine learning, using augmented reality and also virtual reality to really get that engagement. And as we move forward, I think we're going to increasingly see interventions, not projects. So really we're moving to a place where we're solving defined specific projects rather than, interventions rather than projects. So finally, what is redefining construction for us? It's redefining construction through the safe, predictable and efficiency delivery of digitally enabled, off-site assembled, templated, low carbon and innovative solutions. And what we're seeing here is that we get through this approach great benefits in safety. We're seeing around about a 50% reduction in safety, big reductions in carbon through the lack of concrete, reduction in the overall delivery cost of projects, and actually productivity increases as we're starting to see that we can intensify the delivery on site, doubling the amount of productivity. Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Steve. Some really interesting thoughts there, actually. And I think the whole idea of moving from, or bringing innovation in and then actually understanding the difficulties with deploying that innovation as BAU is something that perhaps isn't appreciated. I mean, what are the challenges to digital transformation? I mean, is it technology or from your point of view, what are the main challenges? Just
The real challenge is people and changing the way that people work. Technology isn't an issue. The first project that we delivered digitally was back in 2014, 2015, and that really demonstrated that we could create a model, we could work in multiple workshops around the country and bring assets together. The challenge is embracing people, getting that engagement and sign off early. So a big part of changing and the challenge around people is training. And another big part is really about challenging the way that people people work and holding your nerve. Sometimes when you're building stuff in lots of factories, people go, well, I can't see much activity on site. It's not happening on site because it's happening in all of the factories around the country, and suddenly then you get a big set of maybe that 40, 50 meter long pipe gallery appear in a day. Suddenly that work is all there and it's done. So changing behaviors, changing the way that people think is important, and the challenge.
I think that's a real common theme. Okay, Steve, that's great. Thank you very much. We'll come back with a few more questions. So finally, really excited. We're going to South America now, actually, to Lima. And we're going to, yes, here she is. So Patricia Calderon is a senior program manager in Anfos 21. And we're delighted she's with us. So Patricia has more than 20 years of professional experience on topics related to the water cycle. She has performed activities in the public sector of Peru as a water professional, in what the former INRENA, excuse me for that, what her presence is the National Water Authority, okay, and focuses her professional activities on water resource management, getting involved in the analysis, evaluation, and interaction along with different phases of the water cycle. Now today, Patricia, you're going to speak to us a little bit about client-orientated solutions and their approach to winning projects focused on water and biodiversity. So, bienvenida y gracias por tu participación hoy. Por favor, Patricia.
Thank you very much, Mar. I'm very glad to share this time with all of you. And actually, as you mentioned, I'm here in Lima, in Peru. I would like, first of all, to share with you where we work as Anfos 21. We work mainly in Latin America with projects in 8 countries, as you can see in the slide. Our offices in Latin America, mainly in South America, we are located in Peru. We have 2 offices in Peru, Lima and Arequipa, and 1 office in Chile, in Santiago de Chile. How we focus our solution to our clients, where, as you may know, Anfos 21 here in Lima have a main client that is the mining sector. And we approach to solutions to our clients very much oriented to keeping in mind the ESG criteria. And also we participate in solutions in the water cycle with every stage of a mining project. We go from the exploration stage till the closure, maintenance, and actually my presentation and the information I'm going to share with you is related to some experiences in the sense of closures and remediations. Regarding to these examples that I'm going to share, we focus water and biodiversity in the mining projects in the sense that we keep some introduction and solutions from remediation in aquatic systems or soils ecosystem also, keeping in mind the recovery of the water quality and the biodiversity to engage the biodiversity in these places. This one is an example that we have worked this year. It has been done this year actually. This is the diagnosis of the remediation status of a tailing accumulation in a delta. This is the place where the river comes down. It's a plain area, and here this is the case of the Delta Upamayo, where we found some tailings in this place. To recover the place, we perform some specific studies, basic studies like the flow measurement in the river sector, the analysis of the soil, the geochemistry of the soils, the hydrobiological and the ecosystem in the river, and the biological studies also. The results of these basic studies just support what we propose as an activity to recover the system. The proposal comes out with options like removing part of the tailing, to test some additional materials just to change the chemistry reaction in this place, or just the trial of some vegetation options in the sector. So this result were just submitted to the client, and we're just expecting some implementation just to further analysis. Next, I'm going to share with you some innovations, results or ideas to recovering the restoration of the sector here This is the geomorphological restoration of this environment. It's an innovative idea for a closure of this system, of this area. Was initially perturbed by a mining activity, and we just performed some basic studies to give the option to the clients regarding to some specific soil for the recovering of this place, some specific option for the vegetation that would be suitable. Just remember here in Peru, we have the mining sector keeping in the highland areas, very high altitude. And we keep, in this case, in mind the physical stabilization. That means a design of the appropriate slope and design of the how the soil have to be structured here in this place for the recovering of this area. This is very innovative because keeping in mind the geophysical, the geology, and the geomorphology of the place was something innovative actually for us. Here we have also another case. This case is related to a lake. We need to assess what is the final water quality and the impact on some specific species in the lake. Because of one simulated case, we simulate here the case of the failure on the tailing dam, and we need to assess what could be the impact for the final classification of the dam. In this study, we performed some hydrobiological research. We just came out with the result that there could be a fish species in the lake that could be highly impacted because of this scenario of the rupture of the tailing dam. This was supported also because of the simulation that the tailing dam is just upstream of the lake. The water quality simulation did a result that this species could be highly impacted, and we came out with the result of this classification based on this analysis. Also, there were some other criteria for the final classification, but for this case, the classification was highly impacted and highly significant. This is one example I would like to share with you. And for sure, we have here this another example that is a recovery of the lake. We try here some specific analysis because this lake was surrounded for some waste material. This waste material was giving us some changes in the water quality in the lake, and we just made some specific analysis trying to find out what could be the natural hydrochemical condition in the lake, and to keep what could be the impact of this waste material just keeping in the lake. That was the case. Studies one to the hydrobiological analysis, as you can see in the picture. We just try some innovative solution for the recovering of the water quality. That this could be the phytotreatment, water treatment, phytotreatment solution in the lake, and the analysis for the waste material there, and also the changes. The seasonal changes in the water level just give us some hydrochemical conditions here that we need to focus, just trying to keep a solution like keeping the level or removing part of this waste material just to keep the material submerged, totally submerged, and to keep some chemical conditions in the water. This was very much innovative. We just give the proposal for the clients like in the previous cases, and we just come out with some opportunities to perform further investigation. I'm sorry. These are 4 examples among what all our experiences. Here we are very much focusing in the analysis of further innovative solution for recovery of ecosystems. The opportunities here was related to support some remediation that was very old practice in the mining sector, not is something that occurs recently, I mean in the last decades. But yes, there are some mining responsible for the recovering because of some liabilities that they have to recover. And I think it is for the examples that I can share with you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Really, really interesting. I think you definitely have the best slides anyway, the best photographs. I think
Yeah.
it looks like a beautiful part of the world. Can I ask you, to what extent are the proposed recovery methods actually applicable, or are they all very specific?
Yeah, I think this solution can be applicable, yeah, because we have here in COP15 different scientifics very much dedicated to investigate and to consolidate any kind of remediation solutions. The solution cannot be like a recipe, it have to be analyzed according to the cases. And you can see in the examples, I bring solutions in the water bodies, or in the surface environment, recovering soils or recovering water quality. Though I think these solutions can be applicable depending on the case and depending on the base studies and the result of that. So the implementations are there, could be possible depending of the what solution could be suitable. But first of all, we need to perform the exercise to implement some of those and keep the monitoring. The last part, and also the more demanding part of this, is keep the monitoring of whenever we apply some of the solution. But it's going to be possible.
Really, really good. Thank you very, very much, Patricia. Really interesting. And I think that sort of concludes the end of the 4 presentations now. We move on to the next session, which is really just a Q&A. And if I can ask the rest of the panel to join me, I think is the so that we can all, we have had quite a few questions actually come through in the chat. So I'm going to just pick a few. I don't think we'll have, we'll get through a few of them. So if I can ask the whoever's answering it to just be as short as you can be, I think it would be really, really helpful. So we start off. So a question from the audience is, they understand that the UK is something of a leader in Europe when it comes to the restoration of river habitats. Could Phoebe perhaps elaborate and comment on that?
I don't. Yes, that surprises me.
That's a good comment. Yeah. That's a good comment, Phoebe. That's fine.
well, it does surprise me. You know, we're having a significant negative impact on a lot of our rivers systems. If you look at the chalk stream issue, you know, we hold most of the chalk streams in the world, and yet we're destroying those at a rapid rate. So, I mean, there are obviously great projects going on in places, but I'd be surprised that we're world leading. That sounds like a Boris statement.
I think perhaps it's an interesting view. Yes, I think what I tend to read a lot about is how we're very good at polluting them, not so much as cleaning them up. So okay, thank you for that, Phoebe. Paul, one for you is: can IP as can you use IP as a metric to drive innovation particularly with nature-based solutions? But you talked a lot about IP and how we measure and stuff like. Can we use that as a metric? And do you have any thoughts and comments around where that IP is mostly being developed at the moment?
Yeah, if you have sight of it, Mark, which is what the work we've been doing with the company Clarivate referenced on our material, it shows is you get visibility of what's already happening, and as soon as you get that visibility, you almost have a marketplace, and the marketplace is saying, this is what we're doing around things like SUDS in the urban environment, this is what we're doing with sponge cities, this is where biotech's leading us, this is how we're monitoring the reforestation against deforestation. Sorry, so it drives the change, and for me it holds lots of things to account. Oh, we're doing all these things, we're doing these innovations, we're doing all these. Well, let's prove it. Let's show that we are, and let's show that the innovations we're doing are actually leading to new things being developed. So we're actually rapidly increasing the way we can change things. And as Phoebe alluded to, the need to reverse what's been happening. And that's where I think having something like IP as a metric is important. And excuse the phrase I'm about to use, but it stops the waffle. If we're really doing innovation, let's prove we're doing innovation. Let's show what difference it's making, and not just talk about it, which I think on the political side tends to happen far too much.
I do like a good waffle though, Paul, every so often, you know, so whether it be for breakfast or a discussion with yourself. I think, where's, just as a second question, actually, I just think most of the sort of patents and stuff are being filed in China at the moment, aren't they? It's almost overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, right? And I think to an extent there's two aspects to it. The Chinese government is supporting this, but if you look at China, that's already beyond water scarce in the north, has dealing with huge amounts of pollution as the population grows and industry accelerates rapidly. There's a real need there. There's a real drive that's pushing innovation across the whole of what we call the water sector. So I'm not surprised at all. They're pushing it via universities, pushing it via industries, and pushing it via the SMEs. There's a real drive there, and you can see the benefits when they emerge. Are they rapid enough? That's another question. But it also points to what we're not doing back here in Europe, and as Phoebe alluded to, what we should be shouting about, that we're not doing enough restoration, and therefore we're not doing enough, in my view, and not just innovation but in invention. And I think we need to be far more rapid in this space, not going backwards. You know, the challenges that Phoebe alluded to are here now. They're not 10 years away. So
okay, I think it is quite interesting, because a lot of the patents that are filed in China are filed in Chinese, and actually a lot of we just don't know what some of it is because we're not watching that space. And I think it's something that we in the sector need to really sort of change our approach to that, and sort of understand that that's where it's happening at the moment. Really, there's quite a few questions coming through on green infrastructure. Steve, I'll ask you to have a think about this one. What type of green infrastructure would you like to see in urban areas? And are there any current alternatives to tarmacking everything you were aware of? I'm not suggesting that that's what MWH treatment does, Steve. But you know, in terms of thinking of biodiversity at the start of projects, in the middle of projects, and then maybe Phoebe, you could talk a little bit about that whole green, that sort of blue-green infrastructure in the sort of urban sector. So Steve first.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge is at the moment we look to see whether there's a blue-green solution. If there isn't, we revert back to the way that we've always done it and do a traditional construction project. I think the challenge for me and the change that's going to happen is taking a little bit of everything to achieve the outcome that you need. So what am I talking about there? You've got a catchment-based solution. So look at that catchment. That catchment will solve some problems, but not all of the problems. Then you move from that catchment into the network. How can you solve some of the problems in the network? Let's say you got a lot of infiltration. Remove 50% of the infiltration at a very cost-effective amount. Then that leaves you at the end a treatment plant or a typical construction project that you may need to build, which should be considerably smaller than you would have done if you had have approached it in the traditional way. So I think that sort of approach is really required. The challenge that we're seeing with it is time, and too often you have regulatory dates that need to be met, that you have to make very quick decisions, and going down these catchment based and these network solutions take time through all of the stakeholders to have. So there's got to be some sort of balance between the pace of improvements in the environment that we've got and the need to improve the environment in itself.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of very simple things that can be done in terms of green infrastructure that I think, because people aren't used to thinking like that, things aren't being implemented. But you know, there's permeable paving that can be put in parking areas instead of tarmac. There's rain gardens. There's green roofs, brown roofs. They're all quite simple to sort of maintain once they've been put in place. And I think it's just that whole it's got to be a mindset sort of change. I think that these things, you know, should just become second nature and not something that is sort of almost a luxury type thing to install on buildings. We should be looking at rainwater harvesting in every possible way we can as well, and use of grey water. But it comes down to management of these things as well. It's all well and good putting them in place, but if we don't manage those features correctly, then they lose their they become no longer fit for purpose, and that's no good either. So there's got to be sort of monitoring and management in place as well for the future.
Yeah, I think quite often my experience, biodiversity and innovation, they sort of get thrown out of the way when the project starts, when the rubber hits the road, sort of a thing. I think it's really important, as Steve said, to have it really embedded through the whole life of the project. So I've got one final question actually here that's really interesting. Something came up a lot when I was in Sweden too. Maybe Patricia, you could help us with this. Can you explain the potential benefits of integrating traditional ecological knowledge and traditional local knowledge, particularly from indigenous communities, into the strategies, the water management strategies? This was something that was really respect for all stakeholders and water rights holders and indigenous communities. I'm just wondering, because you work in mining community, you work in the mining, have you got some thoughts about that, Patricia?
Yeah, actually, as you mentioned, we work in the mining sector and we are very much focused on the water cycle, research and measurement. We keep in mind that all the solutions that we just come out have to keep all the water management best practices, but also keeping in mind the ESG criteria. That is why we align this solution with the social environment surrounding these the places. And we just focus on trying to enhance the social participations. This is quite difficult sometimes because of this. Everything related to the water is very critical here in Peru for the mining practices. And we just got so much experience just dealing with different kind of opportunities to research and to give our clients the best solution for the practices, keeping in mind not only the social criteria, but also the environment. So best practices in the water management for any mining operation is our key goal or criteria to come out with any solutions. One of my examples I show here is related to the Delta Upamayo. In the examples here, the intention to recover these plates, for example, is because the community surrounding the place, because this is the last part of the river, the community surrounding the place wants to keep these spaces. So to recover this extension, this quite extension area, to keep some livestock farming or some other activities that used to do before this appeared. And that's why the intention that to apply some recovery strategy as soon as possible. So we just in the plan to implement some of that and to keep the monitoring for the results. For us, it's a key criteria to engage social aspect with water management solutions.
Okay. Right. Wow. Thank you. I've just got the text that says wrap it up. So thank you so very much to everybody who attended and for spending an hour with us. Thanks, of course, to my terrific panelists, to Phoebe and Steve, Patricia, and to Paul. I was sort of essentially thinking about, you know, how broad this topic is and how do we pull it together, and we have spent an hour really running right across from what is biodiversity, freshwater and marine ecosystems, and then moving into how innovation can help drive some of the changes in that, then onto construction, and then all the way to, you know, what the work that some of the solutions, the client-oriented solutions that Patricia is doing in Peru. It shows that really biodiversity, and this is an obvious statement, biodiversity covers everything. And my only regret really is that we haven't been able to answer some of the questions that we've got through. I'm hoping that Danielle will be able to pick those up and we'll be able to put them out there. But it's a big old topic, isn't it? And whereas it is easy enough to get a bit depressed about the state of the world. One of the things I did see in Sweden was the Young Water Prize, which is kids who are up to like 19 years of age. And the winner actually was an American girl. And there was a Turkish girl, and then there was two lads from Mexico. So it's very, very worldwide. And their enthusiasm, their energy, and it was all biodiversity. It's all about removing microplastics and what have you. So there's plenty of optimism as well, and I do remain optimistic. But in the meantime, can I just remind all the attendees to fill out the feedback survey that you will receive 1 hour after the webinar, please. And if you don't, I'll have to come after you and get you to do it. So that's it, I think. On that note, I'm just going to bring it all to a close and thank everybody, and we'll see you all very soon. Okay, cheers, bye-bye.